Because I cut my teeth in what most call the Barnum and Baily Circus side of ingestible CPG, aka the sports nutrition niche of the supplement industry, I'm very used to founders making big things coming proclamations. But that being said, I'm struggling to remember the last time I felt this much pre launch wonder or intrigue around a functional CPG product, with many competitors, retailers, and industry colleagues reaching out to get my thoughts on David protein bars. Some of this could be attributed to that half year hype cycle, leaving many to wonder about the product's details. But also that this is the categorical second act for Peter Rahal, who previously founded RXBAR that exited to Kellogg's in less than 5 years for $600 million in 2017. But beyond talking through some of the most interesting moments of that RXBAR wild ride, Peter and I discussed some of the strategic lessons from that successful first protein bar venture that became iterative direct applications within the conceptualization of David. Moreover, we talked through how watching the protein bar market staleness of the last handful of years helped reignite that entrepreneurial spark after trying his hand at being a venture capitalist. Also, Peter and I cover the new strategic approach at David, including which drivers of demand are most important, the remix inspiration for its visual identity, and the brand's bold long-term strategic narrative. But these are just some of the interesting topics we chatted about in this episode. So without further delay, here is the recent conversation I had with Peter Rahal. Now, I said we were just going to get right into it, but I do have at least a funny story. It could be funny now. It was not funny at the time. Story. I don't think I've ever told you this one, but back way before we got connected, and really, I knew you before that, and it was more I knew, I guess, your company, and this is because I was working on a protein bar project, and I believe it was like 2016-ish timeframe, and it was right after the RXBAR rebrand. You guys were, the rocket ship was taking off, and the project shared the contract manufacturer that you were working with, and all of a sudden, all the capacity was gone, all of the line time was gone, and I had to shift the project over to a different production facility and everything like that. So there was this aspect of that I had so much appreciation for what you guys were doing, but then also I was muttering a little bit of fuck these guys, because I was all this extra work I had to do to do that. But Peter, I just want to appreciate you for your time. I'm excited to get into this conversation.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks for your time, and I'm always grateful for your analysis. Been a fan for a while.
It's definitely humbling to hear that. So let's talk a little bit of RXBAR. I know you've detached a little bit from that baby, but I think obviously most people are highly interested in that because, again, talking about I want to say the early beginnings is interesting. I know people have probably heard the how I built this, and there's all this kind of much popular podcasts, and I don't want to go down a lot of that, but I do. Why I think I at least knew of the brand probably before a lot of people was during your guys' first couple of years. I was big into CrossFit at the time, and competitive CrossFit, and I was at a gym that was owned by somebody that was pretty prominent, that was on the CrossFit education team and placed in the top 3, and he was all about getting a lot of the products, and he had RX bars and the old packaging that looked like you guys made it in PowerPoint and and all this stuff. So I remember trying the early products and thought, this is great. This is something completely different than what I had seen in the market as somebody that had been in the space for a while, and said, if they can hit on a couple extra things, they're probably going to do quite well. But share a few of the highlights. I'm sure some people don't know all the different kind of things, but things that stick out in your mind.
As an entrepreneur, I was always into bars. That was my thing, from Detour Bar, Power Bar. So I've been tracking the category. And then when paleo came up, I was pretty into it. And I learned about paleo through CrossFit. It's sort of church and state sort of nutrition and exercise. Yeah. And I remember being pretty strict about it and observing at the gym, Cliff Bars were there and no one would touch them. And I'm wow, I admired that business. And so that sparked the idea. I was oh my God, you can't, if you're doing paleo, there's really no protein bar out there. And then, you just go, I had no sort of pedigree, no real like food retail experience. And I remember like looking at Whole Foods and being like, how the hell would you get in here?
Yeah.
And like on top of it, how the hell would you compete? And so this was like 2012. So CrossFit was just on like foothills of like really taking off. And, and CrossFit was the most disruptive thing in fitness. It was, it was pre all these boutique studios. So, 2012, so then in 2013 and 14, like it was like the coolest thing to do is to go to a CrossFit gym socially. It was kind of like run clubs today a bit. Like it was like, it wasn't just for extreme people. And so, there's the constraint of my experience, resources, and saw these little distribution points opening up where they were preaching a nutrition ideology of paleo. And so it was like this perfect, it was like very obvious. It was like, all right, here's these points of distribution that we could sell to, and they're completely uncompetitive markets. And you remember these brands like Kill Cliff and Progenics? So those are like, I was like, oh my God, like Progenics is doing it in protein powders. Kill Cliff is doing it in sort of recovery energy. Like we can just follow those sort of distribution tracks. And the whole plan was like, all right, we're going to build a paleo protein bar. We're not going to position it paleo because I just like didn't like that. It was too easy. You know what I mean? Like we don't need to do that. And built a whole real food protein bar. And it was actually at the time, like Jay and I were doing it, there was a lot of competition. There was like other people saw the opportunity. So I remember like California, there was like a bunch of little protein bars, saw the same thing and tried. Turns out it's very hard to make a good tasting paleo protein bar. And so whole business plan was like, let's really penetrate that market, be the bar of CrossFit without being the bar of CrossFit in a way. And then we'll figure out how to cross the chasm, sort of reposition. You need to get the business moving to build sort of a platform to like actually do things. So yeah, it was honestly like when Jared and I reflect, that was like the funnest part. Cause like we knew all our customers. It was like CrossFit was so fun. And then it was like, all right, well, if we can get this to like $249, $199, better communicate our proposition. Like I think a lot of America would like a whole food sort of clean label, minimal ingredient protein bar that tastes pretty good. And so that was our focus of like, how do we do that? And we had to make some compromises. Like we used to be 15 grams of protein, 70 gram product weight. There was like, I think it was like 20 grams of sugar, 270 calories. And so like that offering actually didn't work for non-CrossFitters. And so we made some changes. And I remember like the CrossFit community was actually pissed. Like, what? Less protein. We don't care about calories. And so that was, I feel like as an entrepreneur, there's always times where you have to like, all right, you might piss off your early adopters, but you're really serving a bigger market and making more people happy. And those are tough decisions. And so we did that in like 2015 and preparing for 2016. And we basically were preparing the brand for retail or like mass market in a way.
And that was the kind of the iconic packaging shift. And then that married up to the sales channel expansion as well. Cause I think Whole Foods and then, that started to take off into, it was everywhere very quickly.
Yeah. And then like we tried to take the original RX packaging to some retailers like locally, and it just didn't work. The name was confusing. The name didn't mean anything. Our proposition was on the back. So it was back to you say like, you see this opportunity, like you see this with like consulting entrepreneurs, like are your customers idiot or is your product ugly? And for us, it's just very obvious, and made those changes.
Yeah, because I think even the name, RXBAR, it's like it in a way, and ultimately it kind of sticks you to a format. I think even though post acquisition, I think Kellogg's did some expansion and some different things. I don't know how successful that was, but I do think then the RX, that in itself has the connotation back to the CrossFit, prescription of the workout and those types of things. And that doesn't translate to a non-CrossFit. That's jargon. They didn't really understand what that means or whatever. So then it's very different than a lot of people. I guess the model people have taken now is like you really want to put the brand in the front, and you really want to make sure you put all that out there, but then you were kind of minimizing it and taking and putting the product attributes forward and saying, hey, 6 egg whites, whatever, the thing, and saying, hey, this is stuff that you understand. This is stuff that you can see arguably should, command a premium. And let's put that out there. That probably translates much easier to both a natural buyer, but even moving into the mainstream and everything like that. It was just a lot easier for people to get what you guys were trying to do.
Yep. Yeah, I communicated it. And it communicated our value, and then it also solved the name problem. And it's a good case study of branding is not just the name. Like really, it's about communication. And I learned a lot about just branding through that exercise and naming.
And then the wild ride. I mean, I think after some of those moves happened, like I just remember looking at some of the, the syndicated data and seeing, the growth rates and thinking like, holy shit, like these guys are hanging on. Like it was one of those things, like I'm sure it was so wild of like the speed, the scale, just keeping up with everything, because I argue most of the audience understands this, but like, CPG, it's like, it's constantly getting ahead of the demand of this physical product. It's not, like software where, you could just keep replicating these things so quickly or whatever. It's like, you have to be dealing with this. And then you're adding so many different distribution points, and it's hard to understand like, how to just keep up with that, and keep the machine going people wise. All of a sudden you become this, leader of, tens or hundreds of people, and you have to build this culture and build, I'm sure it was just an insane and a really compressed time frame. I mean, we're talking less than 3 years from the time or maybe even 2 years from the time you guys made the decision of the packaging, the shift to the sales channel, and then the exit to Kellogg's.
Yeah. I mean, like I always say this, like you don't want demand problems. Like demand problems are a lot harder to solve, and we usually require like pivoting or something. Or like if you have demand problems, you kind of have the wrong bet. You made the wrong bet. And so you really want all your problems to be supply problems. And that was the case at RX. Like we went from basically 7 million to 161 when we sold, and then we added on another 100 million post acquisition. So anyway, when you're going that fast, like there's just, one as a leader, you have to maintain, like keep it low complexity, right? Like you don't want to introduce complexity, and then you're just hanging on, and it's always going to be chaos. So you kind of have to embrace it. Like this is what it should feel like. But I mean, it's so much fun being on the inside. You're just sort of fighting battles every day, all day.
It's kind of like the the version of, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, like if people that are thrill seekers of like jumping out of planes, or even like, we talk about athletes that, retire, and then they're always searching for that like thing that had all those, 100,000 fans or millions of people at home rooting for them or whatever. Like it's hard to like get back to, because it's a feeling I think that very few probably get to experience.
Yeah.
So let's talk protein bar, like overall market for a while, because like you said, you've been a fan of the format and the category for a while, well before even starting RXBAR. And now with the second venture in the same space, it's like you're quote unquote the bar guy. You know what I mean? Like I made a comment, I think, on the LinkedIn post the other day. I was like, in the beverage space, there's a lot of like repeat people that pick the same space, and they kind of create their but in a lot of these, if it's convenient nutrition or whatever, there's not a lot of them that have like went and tried again in the same space. So there's not a lot of like at least historical patterns to say like this is gonna be whatever. But at least for me, like I've been a fan of protein bars for forever. Like I just even we're going back 15 plus years in college, like holding them in my my college backpack and busting them out in class and eating them, and people saying like, what the heck is this? And whatever. But like, there's been a lot of shifts over the years. Like, I think I remember at least where I kind of got into it early was I think when the spike of like the multi-layered like candy bars that had protein in them, that was like the most
Detour, I
popular.
think Detour.
Detour. Yeah. I mean, that was really, and interestingly enough, I just spoke to the guy that was running the marketing at the time when they said, this is a protein bar on steroids or something like that. They had this like really like just crazy ad that they ran in all those like muscle magazines. And he was telling me about just how quickly when that hit the stands to the spike of sales. And it
Yeah,
was
little days.
wild because, you know, today there's so many different levers and the landscape is so fragmented and things that it's a little bit tougher to see like that. But back in the day it was like, here's your one marketing lever. And then you see such a response and you're like, wow, as a marketer, I did a really great job.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then it's like, you know, I think as the market at least a little bit evolved, again, from a product sense, like I think you got the whole food bars, you got like the high fiber kind of like Quest type bars, and then still the indulgent type things. And then really, I think what helped everybody is that one, I think there was market expansion. Two, just the overall, I guess, dissemination of the category. Like bars became, they were everywhere. And I think there were so many of them that like there was sets and expanded sets. And, you know, you went into even convenience stores and there was a ton of bar optionality. And that kind of really took that category up until the, you know, the end of last decade. Like it was really like you guys started it and then it was like, you know, Quest and One Bars and I think Perfect, like a lot, there was just so many acquisitions. Like you were the most valuable thing in the world if you were running a protein bar company that had demand and people loved you. Then we're talking 2020 hits, and I'm sure like you're sitting there and you're like I'm wondering like how you're viewing that time where all of a sudden protein bars became less interesting to consumers, though if we look at underlying drivers and like everything like all that stuff was still there. I think that because of what happened, you had this delay. I don't know. I looked and I was like, I was kind of frustrated about everything, but also just like, man, like this is wild to see this category that was all of a sudden red hot and then became nothing.
Yeah, it has all this momentum, it's growing, and then you have this acute black swan event that changes behavior in a 30-day period. The entire occasion in which you eat a bar, anything on the go for the more or less, is completely gone for the foreseeable future. Like there's no like light at the end of the tunnel. We didn't know where this was going. So I wasn't in the business. So I couldn't imagine trying to be there and solve that problem. So I think the category is down 50%, maybe even more on some bars. And then the bigger puzzle is that you actually get this panic, acute spike in demand in the beginning of it, which sends you a false signal that you're going to need to supply that. So then you have this like bullwhip effect of like, oh my gosh, place POs to get materials. We got to convert them because everyone's going to be stocking up food. But then actually it was like this demand collapse. So it was like a double whammy. It was like demand and then supply punished. And you saw it even like just at the tail of it, like for two years after, just the supply, you couldn't get to equilibrium. You didn't really know. But I think it's, what are we, 4 years past? So like, I think things are properly back to normal with supply and demand. You just see it. I mean, the signal I would look at is like, what are executives saying about work from home? And all the top ones are like, we can't do this anymore. Come home. The big complicated companies are just sort of in this long negotiation with people. But yeah, it's pretty clear that the great performing companies have to be in office. So that's over. But that was incredibly disruptive. And I think it makes the timing of this new business, David, pretty good. Like there's, barrier to entry is pretty low, but there hasn't been a good reason for entrepreneurs to join protein bars the past 3 years. So it's less competitive than I'd say normally, actually.
Yeah. I think a lot of the, there were brands that got started, a little bit before that 2020 period, and got battle tested. And a lot of them, I think, did in a silver lining sense, they had to quickly think about their business in a more like multi-format way. Like they had to think, how do I take
take the product ethos and the feel, like, how do I make this a platform? How do I make this something more broad? And how do I think about my business more broadly instead of like, I'm a bar company or whatever, which I think now is playing out and provides the ability for people to look at that as a consumer platform that you can build from. Arguably Quest is probably the one that has done the best at that. But that wasn't really a thing. That was, a bar company was a bar company.
Yeah.
And then, now they can be everything within this broader idea of protein, because again, back to like the underlying drivers of just why people were buying, protein bars and some of that stuff, like that didn't go away. It's just that the occasion was gone. And then they shifted that need to something else. Like it was snacks in the afternoon, it was whatever those things were, and you had to chase some of where that was, or at least explore it probably a lot earlier than you did. But I think now you look back and some of those brands probably would be happy that they were forced to do some of those things, but in the midst of it, I'm sure it wasn't a very comfortable moment.
Sure. And if you look at the category on the surface level, there's good products out there, so it's actually kind of hard to find the white space. Like, so I get why you'd go horizontal sooner than later. If you don't get that like product market fit that just goes nuts, it's kind of the thing you would do.
So let's talk. What was the spark for the next venture, David? Like was it during the time when things were kind of in the shitter of the category, and you were kind of looking at that and saying like, everybody is stalled out, and this is my time that I could probably start to conceptualize something new, or was it much sooner than, like, much more recent, that you were just like, hey, there's been a couple of really strong demand drivers that I think I can build at the intersection of, and like I need to take a second shot at this?
Yeah, there's a lot of factors. One, as an entrepreneur, I had a non-compete, so I was constrained. And during that non-compete, I started investing and flirting with other ideas, and I get going, and then I always like pull out. And there's some good ideas in there, but I think the real reason of not going through with some of them was like I didn't have the same sort of understanding and expertise on the actual product. And I think as any entrepreneur, like, someone on the team's got to be an absolute product expert. And I always say, like, I never want to be in a position where I have to like pick up a phone to call someone to fix the problem or fix the product. So there's a bit of that, like this humbling moment of like, all right, bars are my thing. And it took me about 4 years to sort of like realize, like, I'm just going to go back to what I know. And then two, I always had real confidence in my ability as a product developer. I think this is something that's not understood with RXBAR, is like the product philosophy constraints of formulating with whole real foods is very, very, very challenging. Like you can't use certain tools, and I was very frustrated that we couldn't do that at the time. And so I always believed in myself that, like, if I wasn't as constrained, I bet I could make an awesome product. So that was always in the back of my mind. And then through my journey at RX, I saw all our early adopters go from paleo to keto to fasting to carnivore. So like early adopters in nutrition sort of migrate different ideologies or sort of things that, they don't just stick to it. Like people doing paleo in 2013 or doing keto in 2019. And so I saw that leave, and I as nutrition changed, I just saw an opportunity to build a brand that like addressed it in a way with evidence, not sort of ideology. So that was one. And then another factor was that I actually think it's an uncompetitive market. There's like 5 players that have good products, and then just a long tail of stuff. Like the barrier to entry is really low, so you just get a lot of noise. But you can name the top guys on one hand, and for whatever $8 billion TAM, I think that's a pretty uncompetitive market. So that was one. And then I just love the game. Like I love working with people. And then And then I always thought some of the products fell short. So it was a bit of like designing it for me in a way, from first principles with a nutrition philosophy was based on evidence, not epidemiology. And then another factor was like, all right, so here's another thing. It's a bit of a story. So I always loved Power Bar. I don't know about you. When I was a kid, it had like a real emotional benefit. It was hard to eat, so it made you feel like it gave you power. And maybe this was my imagination as a kid, but it was like the category leader. The whole category was called Power Bars back then. And I had a little bit of PTSD from the RXBAR naming thing. I was just like, fuck, I don't want to go through naming.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard. And so I actually wanted to see if I could acquire that trademark and take some of that great DNA that's there and then sort of rebirth that brand. That fell through, but you can see some of the DNA in today. And I thought that was a fun challenge, and I have a lot of respect for that brand and what it did. And so that was another factor too. And then there's one of those things that's like, if you tell enough people you're going to do it, you eventually have to do it. Like, the truth. Like, I was just telling people, like, I think I'm going to get back, and it's like, I told enough people, so I got to do it. So I don't know. So it's kind of convoluted, but those are some of the factors that went into it. And then, yeah, I was investing, and I just like actually hate investing. Like, my DNA, I just like it's not for me. So I just was unhappy, and I needed a job. So
need to get back to building. Yeah, I think that you made a few interesting points that I was gonna bring up. I think that one, you mentioned kind of the nutritional trends and how that moves around, and people will, for good or worse, they'll try to find the arbitrage point, and they'll try to get in and get out and try to do that. But ultimately, it creates a kind of a vicious life cycle that eventually somebody's going to be left with a bag, and and arguably it's going to be the bigger brands because they're going to scale up and have all that kind of structure and rigidity. But you're talking about, you mentioned like Black Swan, and I think about just anti fragility, or just that idea of like being less fragile, or like the idea of like, if you're building around protein in itself, like that macronutrient is the one that over the decades has never really taken a hit. Like, carbs are good, carbs are bad. Fats are good, fats are bad. Protein is always good. Like, that's the thing that people hold true, and that makes it a long-term secular thing that like you could build without the needing to have to pander to the different nutritional trends. You're like, we are this pillar, and we're going to be here for you regardless if you choose this, that, or whatever. We're going to serve this purpose that is arguably going to fit into all the different types of nutritional trends, and we could just stay consistent with that over having to do whatever. And then the other thing you mentioned, I always kind of have this joke that I say everything is a remix of the past. And the first time I saw the packaging, I instantly went to Power Bar, and I go, wonder if he was inspired by that, or at least like he had an experience, an authentic experience with that, because I thought there's a great connection story to that that people were missing. Because again, talk about that LinkedIn post, like people were just looking at one thing and not realizing that there's so many layers to why you're doing what you're doing. It's not like you're just somebody out there making decisions without any intention. Like, you've proven that you have, this thing. So like, it's funny how some people just forgot that you are this, person that has built something substantial and has a lot of like a cerebral person that can think through these thoughts. It's not like you're just throwing spaghetti against the wall and saying like, I hope this stuff works.
Yeah, totally. Like, everything's pretty intentional and meticulously thought out. And I think like the big thing, I think you'll appreciate this, and your audience will, is like, if you look at the category today from just a pure merchandising perspective, and this the natural sort of organic movement, I think, started this. So if you just look visually, the category is defined by flavor, then by brand. And so what that means is you have this kaleidoscope of colors when you shop the category. It looks like craft beer, and to me, it's like the category is yelling at you, and it isn't it? It's not a very pleasurable thing to shop. And so the category used to be sort of, the primary color was brand, and then the secondary color was flavor. And so you'd see these sort of brand blocks, and it was like, oh, I got it. And that's something that was like on our brief was like a strong statement. Like gold is going to be the color of the brand, and it's going to be a strong brand block, and it's going to be easier for consumers to shop. The secondary color will be flavor, and I'm super excited to see it in the set because I think it's something kind of innovative we're doing, and yeah, I just find shopping the bar category it's exhausting and it isn't very helpful. So, and gold has so much meaning. It's luxurious. It's valuable. It's powerful, and so yeah, I'm pretty confident that it communicates what we want to communicate.
Now, with some of the, I guess, strategic narrative, brand strategy type stuff that I don't know if a lot of that has come out completely yet. I think that people can maybe read through the lines a little bit and understand both David in the sense of the masterpiece of the sculpture, and then there's the I don't know, just some of the different taglines and things you guys are using in terms of like, I think I saw finish your masterpiece and a number of other ones. Like I think you could start to see that it's going to have a little bit of like that aspirational kind of like, I don't want to say like evolutionary, but like, trying to get better, trying to like, but not in an aggressive performance way, in a more of a, could fit a bunch of different consumers in a mainstream way. And I think that like, I'm sure a lot of the visual type stuff, and I've seen some of the, at least the photo shoots, or at least the look and the feel of some of those ones. And I'm getting a sense of kind of where you're going to go with it. But is this kind of where that will go? Or is there a little bit of I don't want to say a pivot, but like a turn in terms of where this brand direction is going to go?
Yeah. So we design tools to increase muscle and decrease fat. Our namesake is Michelangelo's masterpiece. And so when you look at all the meaning that is bound up in that and what it takes to sculpt that masterpiece, it's grandiose in nature. It's 15 feet tall, took 3 years. It requires discipline, strength, all these things. And when you think of like the meaning of a statue, and you have to chisel it. So there's so much meaning there. And it's a beautiful, like our brand is really about intelligence, discipline, and beauty. And I hate this word, but it's like unapologetically so. And, this tool is designed in a way that, takes advantage of protein leverage. It's the protein of a meal, the calories of a snack. So it's amazing. I think we've done an amazing job making the tool. And I found a lot of the brands in the space are pretty flat. Like they're kind of position list from an emotional perspective. And, I just don't think there's a great brand since Power Bar actually. And there's great products, but a great brand makes you feel something, and art makes you feel something. And I think that's part of the response, call it controversy, to the brand, is it's polarizing a bit. It makes you feel something, like, and to me, that's a sign it's working.
Do you fear at least a little bit, you use the word like beauty and these things like, and I think at the beginning, because you naturally have to, I guess, speak to a cohort or a niche or something like that. Does that then create some, I don't want to say like a gatekeep, like some, like you, like anybody that has an art gallery, like they have their idea of what is art and not, or like, they have a curation in terms of how they do that. Is there any fear like that then over time, like if you take too much of a unapologetic hardline, that maybe takes, some plays off the board later on, because people will get a false sense of maybe what the brand is going to be, because at the beginning you can't obviously tell the whole story. It's going to take time to build those chapters, and like maybe some people will be turned off. Maybe that's okay, but I think it's just something that was going through my mind when you said something like that.
Yeah, I mean, our intention is to build tools that help you increase muscle, decrease fat, and if that upsets people, like I think it's part of the territory. But I do think, like, if you just try not to piss anyone off, you just don't do anything great. And so like we did a photo shoot and we just had beautiful models, and it was funny, like that bothers some people, but I would say it's like the loud 1%. And I don't think there's anything like fundamentally wrong with that. We don't want to be insensitive, but at the same time, like I think it also goes back to like at RXBAR, we were one of my observations was like people ate our product because they're doing paleo, then they're doing Whole30, and everyone was doing it. And if you look at the actual fundamental reason why people were doing these things, it was all body composition. And so I think the whole category that's what's like the most important thing. And I don't think there's anything wrong with making a tool to help that.
Yeah, I mean, I take the stance of even if we're talking, health span longevity aspects, a lot of times that there's a vanity aspect that goes involved with that, or there's an element of like people do certain things. Yeah, they want to live longer, but like, you get into why they want to do those things. Even when, you look at some of the weight loss pharmaceutical reasons, it's like there's the obvious health things, but then there's the, the social ideals and things that like are way deeper that people just are not going to talk about, but arguably drive a lot of the reason why we are the number one market for those and just weight loss or weight management products as a whole. And then, just overall, you think about the health and wellness journey of people. Like a lot of times it's geared towards things that are, the fountain of youth, the beauty, like people won't explicitly come out sometimes and say those things, but a lot of it is mapped back to that, like, I guess, I don't want to say visceral, like things that are just, I don't know if it's in our DNA or not, but like for whatever reason. And like you said, sometimes putting some of that stuff to the forefront makes people uncomfortable or it's controversial, and some people will be loud about it. But then, it's kind of like the hatred for Amazon. People will be loud and talk about it, but then when they go home, they buy all their stuff on Amazon. It's just like, what, what I mean? Like when they're in private, they probably get in their own head and realize like, oh, that does actually make more sense than it should.
Yeah. I think, the merit of your product is really the thing that matters most. So, but we want to make people feel a certain way. Like I think that's what brands should do. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs on the investor side sort of like don't take any risk on brand, and you just sort of become boring. Like you just got to have a point of view on the world. You have to have a vision. You have to have the values and meaning behind it. So
yeah, because I think if we talk product, I think, and you agree, I think like RXBAR and then like the product has to be great. It has to, and great is product market fit. It has to taste objectively great across the category. It has to meet these standards that I think people are expecting. But that to me is the entry fee. That's not what ultimately is going to be the sole reason why you're going to win, at least today, because there's so many products. It's hard. So then you move into what you're mentioning, like that bold strategic narrative. Like you have to be distinct, and the way to be distinct is really off of a lot of those things you build off the product that has to speak to somebody much more emotional, or much more that ultimately will lock people in. And the product still has to be great, but like the end of the day is like people now want both. They want to have their cake and they want to eat it too. At least the ones that are going to do like exceptional things. I mean, obviously people can build a respectable business by just doing maybe one thing, but like if you have outsized ambitions and you want to be great and you want to be like, it's hard not to be able to do both of those things. Like you have to, I think, in these ultra competitive categories.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. You have to perform. The world's so competitive. You have to perform on all fronts.
Yeah, the differentiation point. Yeah, you could spend years in the product development and whatever, but it's like from the proprietary aspects of this, that, or whatever. Like everybody's picking from the same buckets of things, and they're all putting these different sequences or connections together, and some look a little different than other ones. But at the end of the day, they're not going to be that much different. What's going to be different is really the stuff you're talking about. What those products make people feel. That's arguably going to be something that can be quite distinct.
Yeah. Like I said, like the definition of art, like good art makes you feel.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that what I'm most excited about is not only the responses or the things that people are getting from some of the hype cycle, and you guys send out some bars to people. I've tried it. We all kind of given feedback or whatever. But I think that there's when you start to get it out actually into that market and people get to try. Like I'm excited to see the feedback. There's been few things that have gotten in the CPG space that have gotten people this excited. I think I mentioned to you in like a message, a couple weeks ago or whatever, like the amount of competitors, retailers, customers that reached out to me to try to get my feeling on what was going on. It was at a level that I'd never seen, at least recently. And that in itself is probably going to produce some pretty good results. So I'm excited to see how that all goes. But I mean, Peter, thanks again for the time. I appreciate just everything you shared. It was definitely a fascinating conversation.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.
But I hope you enjoyed the first principles thinking that went into my latest YouTube video. If you did, can you do me a favor by hitting that like button? That quick and free action helps YouTube know my content is worth spreading to more people. Also, we're getting really close to reaching my next subscriber goal, and it would be great if you join me on this journey. But to do that, we need to fix the fact that slightly more than 3/4 of you that are watching this video right now are not subscribed to my YouTube channel, and that hurts my feelings. Regardless, I want to thank you for giving me some of your attention and time, and I'll see you on the next one.